Okay, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أما بعد. So we're doing the second part of the Battle of Khandaq, and if you were with us last week, you would remember that we talked about how the preparations were made by Muhammad Sallam and the Sahabi in what was considered to be probably the most difficult and testing time for the Muslims. And if you look at it in comparison to all of the other battles that occurred, there was even a hadith by Salama who said that when the preparation of the Battle of Khandaq was happening, and then they were very close to the attack, nobody had felt more fear in any other battle other than this battle, the Battle of Khandaq, and a lot of the explanations will be there. So before I actually proceed, I want to just sort of open up with the ayah of Surah Al-Ahzab, which talks about the Battle of Khandaq. Now, it's always good to try and obviously when I go for the story, it's nice, alhamdulillah, you get to understand it because it's in layman's language, but it's always good to refer back to the Quran because the Quran is exactly telling you these stories. And so in Surah Al-Ahzab, we find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, "O you who believe, remember God's favor to you when the enemy forces attacked you and we sent a wind against them, along with forces that you could not see." So this is talking about a section of the story which we will come to. Probably won't get to today, but it'll probably be next week. But all of this will resonate. All of this will come to the surface. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about how Allah ta'ala favored you, the Muslims, when the enemy forces attacked you. And what did Allah do? He sent the wind against them, along with forces that you were unable to see, the forces of nature, etc. God sees well what you are doing. Remember when they came at you from above and from below, and when your sight was blinded and hearts arose into your throats, you were confused in your thoughts about Allah. Their believers were put to the test, and they were violently shaken. Now remember when the hypocrites and those with the disease in their hearts said, "It was all misleading. What God and His messenger promised us, they lied." And remember when one group of them said, "O people of Yathrib," they didn't even call it Medina. They didn't even want to accept the name that Muhammad gave, Medina. They said, "O people of Yathrib, there is no place for you here, so go back." And a group of them did ask the Prophet, saying, "Our home lie exposed," yet they were not exposed. All they wanted was to flee. And if they, the enemy, had gained entry from outside and had asked them to revolt, they would have done so without great hesitation. Whereas they had earlier promised God, but they had earlier promised God that they would not retreat, and promises made to God are answerable. Say, it will not avail to you if you run, whether from death or from battle. In such case, you will be allowed to enjoyment. You will only be able to enjoy only for a brief moment. And say, who is who is it that can protect you from God if He wishes you to do harm or to be merciful to you? They shall not find anyone to help or aid them apart from God. God knows which of you hinder and which of you say to your brethren, "Come over to us," yet they really go to battle. They are ungenerous to you, and where fear arrives, you see them looking at you with their eyes rolling, like those who faint at death. But when the fear is gone, they pursue you with sharp tongues, greedy for the good, the booty. Those people did not believe, and so Allah nullified their action. And this was an easy thing for Allah. They considered that their clans had not gone. And if the clans should again come, they would wish to be among the Bedouin, asking for news of you. Yet if they were among you, they would only do in a battle just a little. They wouldn't even do hardly anything, just to show you they were with you. In the messenger of God, there has been for you an excellent model for those who have hope in God in the last day and who frequent mention Allah. When the believers saw the clans, meaning all of the armies that came to fight the Muslims, they said, "This is what God and his messenger promised us." God and his messenger spoke the truth, and this only increased their faith and submission. The believers include some men who are true to what they promise Allah. Of them are those who already fulfilled their vows, while some of them still wait but have not changed at all. God will reward those who are true in their sincerity, and he will punish the hypocrites if he wishes, or he will turn aside from them. God is very forgiving and merciful. God turned back those who disbelieved by their rage. They gained nothing good. Yet God gave satisfaction to those believers in the fighting, and God is strong and powerful. He brought down from their forts, from the forts as in their castles, those of the people of the book who allied with them and cast terror into their hearts. Some you killed, others you took captive. He made you to hire to their land, meaning take control of their land, properties, and belonging, as well as to the lands you have not yet trod. And God is capable of all of things. And this is Surah Al-Ahzab in verse 9 and 13. And that is a really, mashallah, beautiful summary of the events of the story. And the most beautiful thing about Khandaq was, surprisingly, when we talk about Khandaq, we're talking about 10 to 15,000 warriors, mercenaries, who have come to basically, as far as they're concerned, deal with the final blow against the Muslims. But in this, what was amazing, there was very little fighting that occurred. So why did Allah make this happen? Battle of Badr, they fought with the help of the angels. Battle of Uhud, there was no angels. They went in there and they showed their grit. They showed their might, and many will reward you with martyrdom. But what was Battle of Khandaq all about? What was the moral? What was the value of this that Allah Ta'ala wanted to teach the Muslims? There were several lessons in this. One of them is to show the Muslims how much heart do you really have when it comes to believing in me. And this is where Allah Ta'ala said in His Quran that your belief was about to leave you from your throats. Your soul wanted to leave you because of the pressure, because of the psychological fear of having all of these people coming for you, and then you were worried about your families inside. This is about testing your faith. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests our faith every single day, except for every one of us, we have different levels. We have different, points at which we break. And the idea is, through all of our life, from the day we are born until the day we die, we want to push ourselves more and more and more. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can only reward those who truly deserve paradise with the greatest test. And this story will tell us this. So last week we talked about how when Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam heard news, and that news specifically came from his uncle Al-Abbas in Makkah, telling him, "Oh nephew, you have to be ready. You don't realize what's going on. They're preparing a massive army, a huge army against you. And that army consists of a huge number, a conglomerate of an alliance of all these various tribes. And if you look at this map, for example, these are all the various tribes that virtually came together to deal with and to really throw that final blow against Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this was all what? Pushed by who? The one army, the one tribe that had so much enmity against Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Banu Nadir, who Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam ejected out, who Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam threw out of Medina because of their treachery. The conditions were so harsh. Subhanallah, when you go through the stories, there was no food. What was interesting about the fact, in this time of the year, there was no food for the people in Medina. Now, whether that was because it was very harsh conditions, the weather, the fruits hadn't been ripe out, whether it was a very bad year, but there was a whole host of reasons why this happened. One of them, the scholars say, is that because of the attacks of all the various tribes, and we talked about Dhul al-Ridda, we talked about all the various other attacks against Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This affected a lot of the trade caravans that are going forward. So trade was bad. The economical year was not very good for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So there was not much food. So Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what would used to happen was, the Sahabi would get things like barley and they would mix it with oil. And that's not what they normally do, but just to kind of give it a little bit of flavor, they had leftover fat. So if you ever go to the butchers and you see when they skin the animal, prepare the nice meat for you, so your wife or your mum can cook you the nice, leg of lamb or whatever, the fat that gets thrown to the side, that is what they had to eat. And the Sahabi said the fat was in leather bags and we had to put it in our mouth and our breath stunk so badly. And we almost wanted to vomit because it was so hard to swallow that fat. It would be stuck in our throat. But that's all they had to eat. And we talked about that beautiful story about Jabir ibn Abdullah, where he said that I saw the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ come out the trench and he lifted his top up just to clean off the dirt. And I could see a stone wrapped around his waist. And they would do this, tighten up against their stomach to give the stomach the sensation that the stomach is full. That's what they say during Ramadan. As the days go more and more, as you go past the fifth or sixth day, your stomach lining shrinks. So when you eat a little bit, you feel like you've already full up. So they would give that sensation to their mind that their stomachs are filled. The extreme weather, it was minus temperatures during the night. During the day, it was freezing cold. And these Sahabi had to go out there and they had to dig a trench 2 meters, 1 meter deep. We're talking about 13 foot wide, and we're talking about at least 3 kilometers. We're talking about 10 Sahabi covering an area of 40 meters. That's a huge amount of digging. And they didn't have any wheelbarrows, they didn't have any shovels. They had to just pick up the dirt and put it into their clothing, into their thobes or whatever they were in, the 2 pieces that used to wear. And they used to carry this out the trenches, throwing it out. And these pictures will show you illustration. There were models that were done, how these trenches were dug by these Sahabi, and you get an idea of the size and the effort that had to be put in there. The conditions became so difficult. Muhammad ﷺ was worried about the internal security as well. Yes, Banu Qurayza were the last of the Jewish tribes, and they had to renew their vows with them 3 times, their agreement, because of the treachery of the Banu Qaynuqa and the Banu Nadir. Because they had to get rid of them, Muhammad ﷺ had to keep going back to Banu Qurayza and say, are you okay with our agreement? I want to make sure that no hard feelings because of what's happened to them, that we're still in good position. And they agreed. But Muhammad ﷺ never ever trusted them. And so therefore there was that subconscious thing in Muhammad ﷺ's mind about, are they going to betray me? Then there was that worry about the hypocrites, the known hypocrites, people like Abdullah bin Ubay, who were the leaders of the hypocrites, causing trouble, causing weakness amongst his community. And don't forget the women and the children, they were put into the fortresses of the Banu Harith. They were put into those big castles because that was the only protection, because all the men could not be in their homes to protect their wife and their children and their mothers and their fathers. They were out there digging and they were guarding the trenches. So Muhammad ﷺ divided the people. He divided the Muslims. There were 3,000 Muslims, and he divided into different parts to cover the area of the trench. Now, in one of the diagrams, you can see this will kind of give you the idea that this is the northern part where the trench is dug in this 90 degrees. That's the northern part of Medina. And so the armies came from this angle because that was the only entry point. And further south, these were the villages of the Banu Qurayza and some of the other villages that were there. So Muhammad ﷺ divided these armies, and they had to constantly patrol the trenches, these 3 kilometers length of these trenches. And so what the Muslims used to do, remember, there was no floodlights. Okay, there were few torches. And you have to remember, Muhammad ﷺ is surrounded by 10 to 15,000 soldiers. The Ghatafan, the Banu Asad, you're talking about the Quraysh, the Banu Amr that's joined them, etc. They're all over the place. And Muhammad ﷺ had to ensure that the army, the soldiers, ensured that they gave the impression that they were fully guarding the trenches. So what the Muslims used to do when they used to patrol back and forward, they used to always continuously shout out, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. So the enemies could hear and think, okay, that area is being patrolled, that area is being patrolled. So it would give the impression to the enemies that there were more of them. The Quraysh had already moved with 10,000, maybe 5 to 10,000 of their soldiers and their warriors, with the unifications of some of the other tribes that were around their regions. They had enlisted the Abyssinians, who were mercenaries that would fight for you for money. Some of them were slaves, and they traveled to the streams of Ruma, the confluences of Ruma, and they settled themselves between the areas of Al Jurf and Zagab, which is almost like going towards Uhud in this region. The Ghatafan tribe, they came from the area of Najd, and Najd was in the eastern province of Arabia. So the western province of Arabia is called Hijaz. The eastern province of is Najd. Now, one thing you got to remember about the Ghatafan tribe: most people from Najd, okay, the most people from the Najd tribe themselves, they are real serious Bedouins, right? So in this diagram, for example, Hijaz is what is green, and what is in the orange is effectively the Najd area. These guys are hardcore Bedouin villagers. They've got no real morals and values. And the Ghatafan tribe, remember, they got enlisted into this because they got bought into this. The Banu an-Nadir agreed with the Ghatafan that they will give them 1 year's worth of dates or whatever produce they have in Khaybar as a payment to do this. That is what they agreed. So when the Ghatafan tribe turned up, they came with all their various tribes and the people that they enlisted as part of the payment. And they came with an army of 6,000, and they met at the side of Uhud. Okay, so they came in at the area where it was very close to Uhud. So almost like to the western side of it. So when you look at this map now, all of the 3-4 different tribes, not 3-4 tribes, but the 3 groups of the armies were coming in from the north, and they were coming from any angles that they could potentially fight and attack the Muslims. Now, obviously, at this time now, the Muslims had enlisted 3,000 men. The women were put in the fortresses, and Ibn Maktoum was in charge of Medina. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the ayah of the Quran, and He said, "And they came at you from above and below. And when the eyes turned dim and the hearts rose into your throats, and you were having doubts about Allah." So this was a part of the ayah that I read in the beginning. So this refers to this part, that because the Quraysh came from the south, the Ghatafan came from the north, and so Allah is saying, and they came at you from above and they came from you below. And when your eyes turned and your hearts rose into your throats, you would think to yourself, how are we going to survive? Now, you got to remember, Muhammad Sallallahu is surrounded by different ranks of Muslims. He has the Muhajirun, the hardcore. They're almost like they were unshakable. They have seen 13 years of hardship in Makkah. They were tortured. They were killed. They had nothing. They were boycotted for 2 to 3 years. They had seen all difficulties. They were like the elite. They were like almost like the SAS of, for Muhammad Sallallahu. They were the elite group. Their iman was unbelievable. Then you had the Ansar. So the elite of the Aus and the Khazraj, who were building their strength up. But then you had many of the other Muslims who were just there, who were, the practicing Muslims, but they didn't have that kind of level of iman and training. And then remember, you had the hypocrites. And there was a mention of the ayah in the Quran where Allah Ta'ala says, the hypocrites and those whose hearts have disease. So they weren't actually hypocrites. Remember, a hypocrite is the one that doesn't actually believe in Allah. That when he gets tested, he completely disowns himself from Allah. When things become difficult, he just disowns himself from Allah. That is a hypocrite. But the ones who have the diseases in their heart, they're the ones who start doubting whenever things become difficult. And when things are easy, they love Allah, they worship Allah, they raise up their hands for dua. But when things become difficult, when they get tested by their families, when they get tested by their job, they start to doubt Allah. This is the disease. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to these people. And then your hearts, they rose up to your throat like they wanted to just leave you. And you are starting to have doubts about Allah. How can Allah put us in this situation? How can Allah put us in this difficulty? And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala started testing them, making their life and their situation more and more difficult. So we can see now the Muslims are panicking, and the Muslim army, whoever their 3,000, now remember, out of that 3,000, there was only very few of them who were strong in the Iman, but they carried on working 24/7, trying to protect their loved ones. Last week, I touched upon at the end of the class. Now, Huway bin Akhtab, who was the leader of the Banu Nadir, this was the man who went with a few of the Jewish leaders, and he went to Makkah to talk to the Meccans, the Quraysh, about joining with the Banu Nadir and taking an alliance, taking a huge alliance with all the other tribes. They then arrived, Huway bin Akhtab. Now remember, we have a trench. Huway bin Akhtab managed to sneak himself back into Medina. How did he do that? Well, don't forget, Huway bin Akhtab lived in Medina. He was part of the Banu Nadir. They were the original. Hey, they were even there before Muhammad Sallam even turned up. So they know how to get in. Huway bin Akhtab comes into Medina only to see one man, a man by the name of Khalid bin Asad. Khalid bin Asad is the leader and the contracted leader of the Banu Qurayza. And he manages to enter in, and he starts knocking on the door of the Khalid bin Asad, of the Banu Qurayza. Now, Banu Qurayza have a fortress. And so they have these massive big doors that stop people from coming into their fortresses. And all the people of Banu Qurayza, they live in that fortress. So Huway bin Akhtab, this person is the most treacherous individual that you can imagine. He turns up knocking on the door. When Khalid bin Asad sees him, he said, "Oh my God, there's trouble with this guy." And he shouts out to Huway bin Akhtab, "Why have you come here? We don't need you here. You are only here to create me trouble." Huway bin Akhtab said, "Khalid bin Asad, you have to let me in. I need to talk to you." He says, "I don't need you here right now. I have a deal with Muhammad Sallam. You see what's happened to the Banu Qaynuqa. You see what's happened to your tribe. Don't bring this trouble to my doorstep." But he did not want to listen. Huway bin Akhtab, he started to insult Khalid bin Asad. He said, "The only reason why you won't let me in because you don't want to share your cornbread with me. You're a tight individual and you're despicable." This embarrassed Khalid bin Asad. So he said, "Fine." And you open the door. The moment he opened the door, Huway bin Asad said to him, "Khalid, I bring you fame forever and a huge mass." And he goes, "What is this? What are you talking about?" He says, "I bring you the Quraysh with all their chieftains and the nobles who I have left encamped by the confluence outside of Medina. And the Ghatafan tribe have come with their huge masses. We cannot lose. You must join us in this fight now. You must join us. There is no way that we can lose." Khalid responded to Huway bin Akhtab. He said to him, "What you bring me, I swear by God, is shame forever. And a cloud that has lost all its water, it may thunder, it may have lightning, but there is nothing in it. There's no water. All of this is talk. You bring all these armies, you bring all these people, and I'm telling you now, what is it going to amount to? Nothing. Muhammad Sallam has beaten every single one of you. Even when the odds are against him, you have done nothing for me. Damn you, Huway. Leave me to maintain my pact with him. I have never found Muhammad to be anything but trustworthy and honest." Even the Jews, the leaders of the Jews, even with their despicable behavior and the act, recognize this quality of Muhammad Sallam. Even a man by the name of Amr bin Sa'd bin Qurayzi, he listened to this conversation, and even he said to them, "Look, if Muhammad has this pact with you, but you're not willing to help him, then why don't you just leave him? Leave Muhammad to himself." Huway bin Akhtab continued to badger Khalid. Khalid did not want to know. He was so scared. He goes, "I know, I have this feeling that if I listen to you, I will be damned. I will be doomed. The Banu Qurayza will be doomed." But he kept on badgering him. And Huway bin Akhtab guaranteed the Khalid bin Asad that, "Look, the Quraysh and the Ghatafan will not leave until they destroy Muhammad." And just imagine, If Quraysh and the Ghatafan destroy Muhammad, you can get back to having that power. We had that power before these Muslims came. We ran all these Arabs in Medina. We were the controllers. We ran all the economics. We ran all the trade. We ran even the selling of arms. We could get this all back. And eventually, he really badgered Khalid bin Asad so much that Khalid bin Asad, he just completely dissolved. He had no more strength and energy to fight Huyay bin Akhtab, and so he agreed. He said, fine, but under the condition, just to make sure that the Quraysh and the Ghatafan tribe don't disappear without fighting and beating Muhammad, I want hostages. Give me 90 hostages from the Quraysh and the Ghatafan so they know that I have their people and they will not leave. Very smart guy. That's a very good deal to make. Not a good deal to leave Muhammad Sallam, but given the situation, if you want. And then he said to Huyay bin Akhtab, and you, my friend, you will not leave this fortress. If you're that confident that they're going to beat Muhammad, then you're going to stay with me in this fortress. Because if the Quraysh and the Ghatafan go, they run, then you will stand next to me and face the consequences with the Muslims. When they come to account me, you're going to be accounted as well. So Huyay bin Akhtab had no choice, but feeling very, very confident, knowing the odds against Muhammad Sallam, he said, I will be there for you. And so Khalid bin Asad did the most despicable thing. The contract that he had, the documents that he had, he destroyed them and he absolved himself of any agreement with Muhammad Sallam. Back in the camp of the Muslims, when the situation was so difficult, 3,000 Muslims, Muhammad Sallam, knowing the situation that not all of these Muslims are going to be backing up the true hardcore Muslims, over 10,000. And you got to understand from their perspective, he's got a rough number, but he doesn't know how many. There could be a lot more. So Muhammad is he is fearing for his Muslims. He's even put to the test. But what could be worse when he hears the news from Zubair bin Awam? Zubair comes up to him and says to him, O Messenger of Allah, I've heard some really bad news. He said, what are you hearing? He said, I've been watching because remember, Muhammad Sallam sent Zubair to keep an eye on Banu Qurayza because he didn't trust them. He said they've had a conversation and they have dissolved the relationship and the agreement and the pact they have with the Muslims. This really concerned Muhammad Sallam. So to make sure that this was true, Muhammad Sallam called upon Sa'd bin Mu'adh, who was the leader of the Aus tribe. Then he called Sa'd bin Ubadah. Sa'd bin Ubadah was a leader of the Khazraj. So the Sa'd bin Mu'adh, who was the Aus leader, Sa'd bin Ubadah, who was the leader of the Khazraj tribe. Then he called Abdullah bin Rawaha and Khawat bin Jubair. He said to them in a secret meeting, I need you to go over to speak to the Banu Qurayza, right? Because two Sa'ds, both of you had good relationship with these people before I arrived. I need you to go and confirm, is it true that they have dissolved and finished the pact with us as Muslims? If it's true, when you come back to me, I want you to signal me in a secret way if it's true that they have dissolved the pact. And the reason why is because I do not want the Muslims to hear this. They are already being tested and I don't want them to lose heart, because the moment they find out the Banu Qurayza has turned against us, the enemy is on the inside and they have an army and they can attack us. But if they find out that the news is false and they are still with us, then you can openly declare it to me in front of everyone that the pact is still there. So Sa'd bin Mu'adh, Sa'd bin Ubadah, Abdul bin Rawaha, and Khawat bin Jubair make their way to the fortress of Banu Qurayza. When they enter, they greet the leaders of the Banu Qurayza. However, the Banu Qurayza were not so happy to see them. So when they went into their fortress, they called upon them, Sa'd bin Mu'adh, Sa'd bin Ubadah, listen, we're friends. We've got a long history. We just want to make sure our pact is there and intact. There's no issues. The Banu Qurayza responded, what now? What do you mean our pact? We don't have a pact with you. They denied it. They lied. We don't have a pact with you. They said, why should we have a pact with Muhammad when he has broken our wing, i.e., and deported them, i.e., Banu Nadir, our brothers, and the Banu Qaynuqa. And then they started to criticize Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Sa'd bin Ubadah became so angry, he started to revile, he started to swear at them. And this made them angry. So the argument became very heated. Sa'd bin Mu'adh said to Sa'd bin Ubadah, I swear we did not come here for this. Our issue with them is greater than to settle this with bad language. Remember why we're here, Sa'd bin Ubadah. We are here to resolve our issue. Forget about your anger and your swearing. If we do not get this agreement, we are in big trouble. So Sa'd bin Mu'adh then spoke to them and said, look, in a very calm way, you know of the relationship between us, the Banu Qurayza, and I'm afraid that you might have happened to you the same as what happened to Banu Nadir, or even worse. So you know the situation, Banu Qurayza. Do not be in this situation. But they responded back and they said something very disgusting to him as they insulted him. And Sa'd bin Mu'adh became very angry. And he said to them, it would have been much more appropriate for you and better if you had responded differently to us. So he knew at that point they are not budging. They went back to Muhammad sallam, and when they saw Muhammad sallam, they gave salam whilst Muhammad sallam was with some. So Muhammad sallam was with a band of these Muslims. Remember, what's happening in Medina? Muhammad has divided 200, 300, 400, 300, 200, 300 of the Muslims all around the trenches. So Muhammad sallam is with a contingency of some of the Muslims. When they came to see Muhammad sallam, they gave salam to him and they said the words Udal and Al-Qara. Now, the Muslims were so busy with what was going on, they didn't realize that they mentioned these two words. Udal and Qara were basically the two tribes that created treachery against the Muslims. So we know that, the last few classes that we talked about and how those Muslims, the Qara who got killed, who got, the story of Hazrat Khubayb and how he got kidnapped and taken into Makkah, that all these groups that they came here and they lied to Muhammad sallam and they caused treachery. So when he heard these two words, Muhammad sallam said, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allah is great. This test is great. And immediately Muhammad sallam, he had a cloak. He put the hood over his head and he went into his house and he laid there. Sahabi were looking around, subhanAllah, what's going to happen? This has really upset Muhammad sallam. This dilemma has become very, very difficult. And then after a while, Muhammad sallam, he came out and he said, rejoice at God's victory and for his help. And Muhammad sallam, the next morning, the battle began. And it wasn't the battle, there wasn't that many fighting. Because the trench was there, the enemy tried to find different ways to try and get in. But as they started to do this, the fear started to build up. The fear started to build up. Now, like I said to you, the Muslims are at different levels. People like the Muhajirun, no problem. It was just like, they were like Terminators. There was no fear in them. Bring it on. Even for some of the Aus and Khazraj, the real Ansar, and we're talking about the Ansar. We're talking about the leaders of the Aus and Khazraj, leaders of Iman. They were no problem. They had strength in their hearts. But you remember there was many other people, many other Muslims that were with them. Another 1,000, 2,000 with them. And then what happened? As a result of this started to cause fear. This started to cause doubt in them. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there was the ayah when Allah ta'ala talked about the hypocrites. Here, the anxiety and the fear began to increase amongst these Muslims. The enemy came from them above and below, as the Quran mentioned. And so the Muslims became very confused where they're coming from, because they tried to find any gap that they can to fight, because they couldn't come as a whole army, but this was scaring them. And there, the doubts started to become inflicted and injected into the Muslims. People like a man was mentioned in the Seerah by the name of Mu'attib bin Qusayr. He said, Muhammad used to promise us a little while ago that we would have the treasures of Khosrow and Caesar, of Persia and the Roman Empire. Yet now, look at us. We're in a position we don't even feel safe to go to the toilet because we're going to get attacked. What is this man? What is he saying? Aus bin Khazi, in front of all the Muslims, this man, he will come to Muhammad ﷺ and he will say, O Messenger of God, our homes are open to the enemy. Give us leave to return to our homes. They are outside Medina. They're coming. So these people who were the hypocrites, or some of them who, as Allah describes, they have disease in their hearts. So this is where Allah Ta'ala referred to them, and this is again coming to what the ayah that I mentioned in the beginning. And remember, Allah said, remember when the hypocrites and those with disease in their hearts said, it was all misleading what God and His Messenger promised us. And remember when one group of them said, oh, people of Yathrib, there is no place for you here. There's no place for you here in the army to fight. Go back to your homes where your wife and your children and your parents are. And a group of them, they did ask the Prophet, saying, our homes are undefended. Yet they were not exposed at all. Allah says their homes were not exposed. And all they wanted was they wanted to flee. You know, this reminds me of, the 15, 20 years of us growing up in this country. We as Muslims, subhanAllah, our children, alhamdulillah, are yet to see these challenges, and they will see these challenges. You know what I'm talking about. When growing up as Muslims in the West, 9/11 happened, then 7/7 happened, then all these other little attacks, then in Europe. Every time when things looked like they were going okay, you had what happened in France. All of these little things, when they bubbled up and they made us look bad, the media turned against us. Our colleagues, they turned against us. The little sly comments at work happened. The little sly comments that happened from our community, from our Sikh community, from our Hindu community, from our Christian community, all the comments, the looks our wives and our mothers with the hijab used to get because of what happened. I remember very clearly, many times, more often than I would like to think, that Muslims started to weaken in their iman. How can we have done this? Why do we do this? And they started to even think about, why does Islam say this in the Quran? And then you get these people that come up like Majid Nawaz, who take on the situation and try to make gold out of this by even adding fire, adding fuel to the fire to make this even worse for us. And so these hypocrites that come along, they weaken the Muslims who don't have the iman in their heart. And so Allah Ta'ala says the disease builds up in them and we start to fear. And what do you begin to see? When we talk about this disease, I remember when 9/11 happened, I was in New York at the time, and we had a small Muslim community. It was almost like you don't want to go to the Jummah anymore in New York City, which was downtown. If we were praying in our workplaces, it's probably not a good idea to go into that reflection room, that prayer room, because they know it's us. Some of them were too embarrassed to even be Muslims because, and I remember I worked in a bank, Goldman Sachs, and a lot of the managers, there's a lot of Jews working there, and they had a lot of hatred. I remember comments were being made, very harsh comments were being made. I remember when I was walking in once, after that 9/11, I walked into the office and there was, I remember this Jewish manager and he had a few other colleagues of his, and they were looking at me and they'll make comments. People were weakening. They didn't know whether they wanted to be there or just crawl up and die somewhere. And you find that the Muslims get embarrassed about even talking about Islam, about I need to go to pray. They didn't want to even mention to the boss, do you mind if I just go and sneak out to pray? No, no, no. It's a bad thing because we're the public enemy number one. So there is truth in what Allah says, that even though these stories are stories for what happened then, the principle of these stories apply today and they will carry on applying until the Qiyamah. This is where Allah Ta'ala, He said that for these people who had the disease in their hearts, do they not realize that on the Qiyamah everything will be showed? On the day of judgment, I will show everything. Do you not give me that respect that I am in control of everything? So this is what happened now. As the hypocrites started to create this noise, the weak in Iman started to also fear. And when they started to run back home, the others started to run back home. And so this is where Allah Ta'ala warned Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the ayah of the Quran. He says, they will come to you for permission to leave. It is up to you, O Messenger of Allah, to decide who goes. But be aware, some of them are liars. And some of them, they just don't want to leave. They don't leave because they want to just, get some food or, they want to get some rest. They leave because they don't want to dig the trench and they don't want to fight. They don't want to lose their life. And that's why Allah Ta'ala said in the Quran, do you not think that when you go back, home, that death cannot come to you there? I am the one who ordains death. I'm the one who gives death. I'm the one that gives life. Even if you're in a battle, you may survive, but you think by sitting in your homes comfortably that death will not reach you. Death will come to you whenever I give the order. And so this is what Allah Ta'ala is reminding them in the ayah of the Quran. It's going to come. You are not going to get away from that. Situation became dire for Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It became so bad that Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he ordered the Muslims, he had to create another sect of the Muslims. He asked for Zayd bin Haritha and Salama to take a contingency of 200 and 100 men to now basically police the inside of Medina to keep an eye on the Banu Qurayza. Because what happened was Banu Qurayza locked their fortresses, so not to allow anyone else. So if the Muslims needed help, not to allow them in to come in their fortresses. So he had to now dispatch another 300-400 people, Muslims, to keep an eye on the inside while we try to fight the enemy. So he's now weakened his border. He's weakened the trench region area. Muhammad saw the panic of the Muslims. He just didn't know what to do. He was fearful. So secretly, what did Muhammad do? He sent one of the Muslims a message to the leaders of the Ghatafan tribe, a man by the name of Uwaina bin Hisn and a man by the name Al-Harith bin Auf. And Uwaina bin Hisn was the leader of the Ghatafan tribe. This man, the history will, if you ever read the Seerah and you go, this man is a very despicable individual. He was the kind of person, he was a leader of the tribes of the Najd. Okay, very big tribe, the Ghatafan. Remember, the Ghatafan tribe don't have any principles, nothing. They all just, you pay the right money, they'll do whatever you want. This was the man, Uwaina bin Hisn, that even when he came to see Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, before all of this happened, as a non-Muslim, he would come. Because remember, I mentioned that many tribes would come into Medina to make agreements and trade agreements with Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He was such a rude individual that when he would come to see Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he would not even knock on the door of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he would just enter into his house. And Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would say to him, why don't you ask permission? He said, I don't ask permission from the people of the Adaniya. He had this thing that you're not the pure Arabs. And I've never asked permission of the lower caste Arabs. And I just walk in whenever I want. And this was the person that he was mentioned that even when he saw Hazrat Aisha, and at that time hijab wasn't made an obligation, he saw her and he said, who's this red-faced girl that you got with you? If you want Muhammad, I will give you a more beautiful girl than her. He insulted Hazrat Aisha. This is the kind of individual, despicable. And Uwayn bin Hassan, you'll know that if in the story that he actually, when he did become Muslim, but only outwardly, he became Muslim. And you know the stories of the false prophets that occurred? The moment when the false prophets occurred, he was the first one to leave the Muslims and join the false prophets. Very despicable individual, subhanAllah. But Muhammad ﷺ sent a person to go see these two. And what he said to them, because he knew the kind of people they were. They had no principle. You could buy these people. So he knew that they were bought by the Banu Nadir. So Muhammad ﷺ said to them, I will offer you a deal. If you walk away now from this, I will give you 1/3 of the produce of dates of Medina. And you don't even have to raise your sword. All you've got to do is pack your bags and go back home. They tried to negotiate. Muhammad said, no, we want half, not a third, a half. Muhammad said, no, you take 1/3 or nothing. So in principle, they agreed. But they both agreed that they need to go back and talk to their people, and Muhammad would need to do the same. Muhammad knew the dilemma that his Muslims were in. Muhammad went back. Muhammad, when he got the message back from the messengers that came back from the Ghatafan tribe, he called in Sa'd bin Mu'adh and Sa'd bin Umara and Sa'd bin Ubaidah as well, and he said to them, I want to tell you something. They said, what is it, Messenger of Allah? He said, I made a secret deal with the Ghatafan, but I need your counsel on this. I need your advice and your view. They responded to Muhammad and said, is this something that you wish to do or something that Allah has ordered? This is very important in the principle Sharia, because there is a difference when Muhammad decides something versus when Muhammad has been ordered by Allah. So one is revelation, and one is where Muhammad is permitted to make his own decision. They knew this. That's why they said to Muhammad, is this something of your choice, or is this something that Allah has ordered? And he responded, said, no, this is something which I have decided. So Muhammad said to them, look, I decided this because I swear by Allah, I'm doing this because of what I see in my people, in the Muslims. I see all of the Arabs outside, all of these confederates, the Ghatafan, the Banu Asad, Banu Amr, the Quraysh, all firing from one arrow is the analogy again. They're all firing from one, they're united. And because they're attacking us from all sides, I want to break their coalition against you. I want to weaken their resolve so that you do not feel this kind of panic. Sa'd bin Mu'adh, being the Ansar, he said to Muhammad sallallahu, we used to disbelieve in Allah and worship idols among those people, not worshipping nor knowing Allah. So we used to be of those people, we disbelieved and we worshiped idols alongside with those people. At that time, they would never have dreamed of eating a single day of ours, except if they were our guests or after they purchased it. Meaning, how dare they come and try to bribe us like this, blackmail us? Should we give them our day? Should we give our day of ours, should we give them our property now? After God has honored us with Islam, now Allah has honored us, we are better than them. And when we were idol worshippers, they would never dare take it from us unless they were a guest or whether they purchased. Now we are Muslim, we are better than them. And now God has honored us with Islam, led us to Him, and given us esteem through you, through Him. We will not agree to this. But Allah, all we will give them is our sword until Allah decides between us and them. And he was right. Why would we weaken ourselves? They would never dare do this to us when we were non-Muslims. So Muhammad Sallam, he responded, and he was happy because of this strength and bravery they had. He goes, as you wish. And thereupon Sa'd bin Mu'adh, he took a document and he erased from it all the writing, right, which the Muhammad had written up, because he prepared a document for them to sign, tore it up and said, now let them fight. Let's go. The Quraysh, the battle, as they got through, they started to break through the ranks. Some of them started to break through the ranks. One of them was the cavalry of the Quraysh, and there was a man leading them by the name of Amr bin Abdul Wud. Now, this man was related to the family of Abdul Muttalib, one of the cousins of Hazrat Ali. And he took an army, and as they rode up, it was dark. They didn't realize there was a trench there. When they rode up, they saw this man, and they stopped suddenly, and they realized, we need to get our horses over there. So they tried to ride around to find where the trench narrowed, where horses can make it, and they made a jump. But as they made the jump, they got stuck in the swamp because it was very muddy and wet as well. When they done this, the Muslims came very close to them. The contingency of the Muslims that was there. When they turned up, this man, Amr, he turned around and he said to these Muslims, who wants to fight me on 1-to-1? Who wants to fight me? Now, remember, the story of Amr was at the Battle of Badr, but he got very seriously wounded by the Muslims, and he was unable to fight at the Battle of Uhud. So therefore, he now came at the Battle of Khandaq wearing all of his full armor, and he was so fired up. Now, and he said to them, who will accept my challenge to combat? All of a sudden, Hazrat Ali turns up. May Allah be pleased with him. And he says to him, Amr, you used to be a man who used to swear that if any Quraysh comes to you with 2 offers, you'll accept one. He says, that's right, Ali. I would, and I will. He says, well, I'm a Quraysh. I give you 2 offers. Number 1, accept Islam, make Allah your God, and Muhammad your messenger. He says, I disagree. I don't want that offer. He said, fine. He goes, I'll offer you the second one. He said, fight me. Now, Amr, he said, but you are the nephew of my family. I do not want to fight you. I don't want to kill you. He goes, that's right, but I want to kill you. Now, if you fight me, you said you'll accept one of the 2 offers. Now you have to take the second if you're not going to take the first. And so they fought, and they went round in circle, and they clashed, and eventually Hazrat Ali killed him. And as he killed him, the rest of them got scared and they ran off. Quraysh found out about this man, Amr got killed, and they sent a message to Muhammad Sallam, and they said, we will offer you 12,000 dirhams, send his body back. Muhammad Sallam responded, how? He said, when the police sent this, Muhammad Sallam responded back, we don't profit from your dead. You can take his body and bury him as you like. There was a principle. They had nothing. They could have taken the money. But Muhammad Sallam was a man of principle. So there was these small little skirmishes that began. But now the trouble became more and more difficult. The situation became difficult. Hazrat Aisha narrated in a hadith that she was with the mother of Sa'd bin Mu'adh in the fortress of Al-Harith, in the fortress. And she saw Sa'd bin Mu'adh. Remember, Sa'd bin Mu'adh we talked about was the leader of the Aus tribe. He wasn't old. He was still 29, 30 years old. And these people were so poor that Sa'd bin Mu'adh, he had this armor, but his armor was so small, his arms were completely naked and uncovered. And Sa'd, subhanAllah, may Allah bless his mother said to Sa'd, hurry up, you're going to be late for the fight, for the war. And Hazrat Aisha, radiallahu anha, she says to Sa'd's mother, she said, your son doesn't even have an armor that covers him. Yeah, I fear that he could get injured very easy in his arm because he could get hurt in his arteries or vein, because it's a very dangerous point to be exposed. What did happen to Sa'd bin Mu'adh was an arrow was shot. And when the arrow was shot to him, he did have a very severe injury. Sa'd bin Mu'adh, this man who shot the arrow at him, he says, take that. I am Ibn al-Ariqa. And Saad responded, may Allah make your face sweat in hell. And then he made the dua to Allah. He said, oh Allah, if you will prolong this battle with the Quraysh, then I beg you of you to preserve me for it. Don't let me die now. Let me stay with it because I want to be there for Muhammad Sallallahu and for the Muslims. I would rather fight than those who have harmed your messenger, disbelieve in him and expelled him. But if you decree, I continue the war between us and them, then make me a witness to it and do not make me die. And he said, before letting me engage in battle with the Banu Qurayza. Remember these words, because when Muhammad Sallallahu accounts the Banu Qurayza for what they had done, it is Sa'd bin Mu'adh that Muhammad Sallallahu asks him, what do you think should be the fate of the Banu Qurayza? Situation has become so dire now that Muhammad Sallallahu is in this situation that now the Banu Qurayza send out some of their men to start scouting around the fortress of Banu Harith where the women and the children are. So the situation becomes very, very dangerous. So now Muhammad Sallallahu is faced with a dilemma that he now needs to deal with.